welcome back to ExGarage.
ExGarage.
With Jake the Snake and Heath the Teeth. We'll think of some
Little
better
Richard.
Or Little Richard.
I kind of prefer that. I mean, I got nice teeth, but no, I don't. I don't. We don't need to go there.
I feel like for Little Richard, I think you need to be like a wrestler.
Or did you say? Well, maybe. Do you think Heath the Teeth in terms of biting something?
I was thinking like you talk a lot.
Okay, great. That'll work. Heath the Teeth. Little Richard. Anyway, that's aside from the.
We'll think of better names later. Why are we here?
That's not meant to be a philosophical question.
Why
are we here? Scientology brings us here. Not
Scientology brings us together today.
What was that from? I should know that.
Princess Bride.
Yeah. Oh goodness.
It was actually Scientology.
I didn't get with the program. This is another episode on Scientology. This is our last.
This is the final thoughts on Scientology until we decide to come back to it.
Yes. There's. We're going to do hamartiology, the study of sin. What's their views on wrongdoing? Of course, they wouldn't use the word sin because there's nothing, no one to transgress. There's no laws governing us. Soteriology, salvation, and then our final critique. So,
I'm finding it's really interesting going through these in like a systematic fashion, like we started, because we end up kind of blending all the topics together. So I think it's cool that we're doing it like this, but it is interesting kind of the flow of the conversation.
They're all interrelate, right?
Yeah,
it's like an organism.
Yeah.
Because you find that one doctrine will relate to others. Like we talk about, like you were mentioning even when we talk about ethics and how who defines right and wrong. That goes back to the beginning of Revelation that ultimately Hubbard defines what's right and wrong, and then there's a little bit of ambiguity because it's an open system. Ultimately, things can change. The authority really lies in Ron, and then whoever else now is just standing in the authoritative position.
Right. The way that he talks about himself, and when he's actually referring to the Xenu story, he'll talk about things like, I probably was the first one to discover this in 60,000 years. And and if someone was just to happen by this, in 60,000 years without dying is what he said. Because he said that if you were to find that information and not die, it would be a miracle, basically. So the fact that he discovered it, everybody is depending on him for that information because you have to get to that.
It's almost like you just gave me a great parallel here, an analogy. It's like Moses ascending to Mount Sinai to receive the law.
Yep.
That he because God appointed him to that, he was able to bring back down the nature and character of God revealed through the law.
Yep.
But what's funny is fascinating. The other people couldn't behold that, right?
Right.
It's almost like he is mimicking that in his own way.
In a way,
I find that there's always a perversion of the truth, a distorting the gospel, and the beauty of the fact that there's one mediator between God and man, and that is Jesus Christ, who has revealed God to us. It's not about us getting the revelation ourselves, but God has come and revealed himself to us, right? And Moses was a type of that. Now we got Hubbard saying he is the God-man come to reveal truth to us.
But it's not God coming to him. He works his way to truth.
Yeah. He is the God-man.
Yeah, he is the navigator. He is the one.
But the only problem is he has to distinguish how he's any different from us. So what's wrong? What's wrong with Scientology, Jake? What would they say? Not the critique part. What I mean is, if I'm a Scientologist and I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, this is a problem, right?
Yep.
So what's the problem? What's in their worldview? What is the problem?
So I think, like we've been talking about this whole time, is that as spirit beings who ourselves have past lives, we didn't touch on that a lot, but that is an aspect of it. And there are also other beings that are kind of present in our psyche. We all have past experiences that are really have been bad for us, whether it's through experiences or I think pretty much experiences.
And anytime we are unconscious, our mind doesn't interpret it right, and it's stored in the reactive banks.
Yep.
And can shoot up into our mind's aim point, causing illogical thoughts.
Yep.
Because for an example, say you're at a doctor's office and you're put under through medication, and during that time you're hearing the doctor say something to the nurse. Like, I think he uses an example like this. He says to the nurse, while you're under, the reactive mind is always conscious, and so while you're under, the analytical mind's not working. You are still hearing everything around you, and so you hear the doctor tell the nurse, you're not doing the right job, right? You're not doing this properly. So when you come out of your unconsciousness back to consciousness, say you're in a situation where you hear someone say you're not doing the right job as a painful or a wrong thing to say. You don't respond to the situation with reason and logic anymore. You respond onto this experience that came into you while you're unconscious, which is a fascinating thought, that a lot of the problems that as a Scientologist we would face is the things that are going around us while we're unconscious.
Now, it's kind of relating to the critique side of things. Mm-hmm. You did mention that there is an aspect of Scientology that seems like related to hypnosis, basically. Mm-hmm. So tell me about that, because you mentioned how they control their populace through something like that. So tell us about that.
Yeah. I was just thinking about Tom Cruise jumping on couches. Could you go back? Seriously. My mind just went there. Again, summarize what you're just going after the idea. What idea you want me to get?
Sorry, now I'm thinking about Tom Cruise jumping on couches.
We need to talk about it before we close this episode. I do want to relate that event. There it is. That event back to their theology. There is a direct correlation to their understanding of being a full human and jumping on couches. There really is. So Tom was consistent in his worldview. But what were you just asking me to dig into? Dianetics?
Well, like the way that they control their people through hypnosis.
Oh, yes. Okay, so this whole thing is the way to get rid of all this poor thinking. The problem is this reactive storage of information in the engrams that keep us from thinking logically, and then we respond out of anger. We'll respond in just erratic ways. All that behavior is not you per se. It's just this stuff that your mind's misinterpreting, right? So sin is not a thing in this system, which goes again back to Hindu thought. It is just a perception of when things go not as it should. But then why should it go a certain way, right? Mm-hmm. But that's another question. But the idea is through Dianetic therapy, what ends up happening is you're put into a relaxed place, and there's leading and guiding questions to get you to open up about your life, about deep-seated things in your life, and they then use that. They have all that information on you. Is that what you're talking about? This type of stuff?
Yes, basically, yeah.
And the manipulative part of it, or control, is that you're in a place where you're completely open. Your mind is open to wherever they lead you is where you go. And if you don't go, you're not really going with the process.
Right.
And so we see the manipulative nature of it right there. Is again it going against our nature as image bearers, where we're to be aware, to be. And this is perhaps we're just going straight into critique here. This is another area where it's inconsistent. It says that Scientology is about being a free thinker, but in Dianetics you're not freely thinking. You're being moved along by the auditor, and then they tell you when there's an engram showing up on this little radar, basically where you have an emotional experience, and then you repeat that over and over and over, and eventually you don't have that same emotional response to it, of course, because you've said it so many times. But again, you're not.
The way that this looks is like
soteriology. You're not healing from the event. You're not reconciling the event.
Right.
You're just getting so used to it, you become callous to it.
So the way that this looks like, so we talked about the cans that they hold on to, and there's a dial that the what are they called? The counselor, the person during Dianetics.
Oh, the auditor.
The auditor. Thank you. So the person in the auditing session will be holding two cans that has a current going through them. And then on the side that the auditor is looking at, there's this little dial. So when you say, "Tell me about the time that your mom died," the dial will probably go, way up into, this is something really bad, and then they have to keep on talking about it until, "Tell me about the time that your mom died. How about now? Tell me about it." until you're not feeling anything anymore, or at least you have your emotions calm enough to talk about it. I saw another example where in more of one of the critical documentaries, a guy that used to be higher up in it, and he said, this is something that Scientologists will swear by, that it's that effective. But they'll have sessions where they're doing something similar, where the auditor will do something like, yeah! And they start to like yell or
stimulate your
stimulate your senses, start insulting you until you're able to calm yourself down.
Wow.
And you train yourself to be analytical and not reactive.
Yeah. So this goes into, so the problem is the engrams, stored information that's just causing you to act irrationally and weird and is the actual way of explaining all what really it is, transgression, and or just being fallen in Adam. We don't perceive reality rightly, and that causes a lot of sins of unintentional sin as well. But going back to this idea of so what is salvation for them is to again get rid of all these this stored information that you get either unconsciously or half consciously. Get rid of those by repetition processes and all these other techniques, like you're talking about, barking like a dog at them, until they. And so, what happens then, according to the thought, is that once these engrams are erased, it transfers that information, because he says consistently that you can't get rid of that information as part of your life, right? So what ends up happening is that poor information gets, you are now aware of it, and it transfers over into the analytical mind, and it stores itself and files itself just as another memory in your life. But it stores itself so far back in those time slots that they don't really come up on you anymore. And if they do, your analytical mind will be able to, I'm assuming, be able to think through it rationally. And so what it's doing is it's not healing it, right? It's just for their salvation, it's just pressing it down into the mind to where it's not going to react upon you.
So they talk about suppressive persons, but this is a real suppressive act where they're not healing it. They are cramming it down.
That's great. I think that's a fair assessment, is that it's not seeking restoration. It's seeking
control.
The system is controlling, and it ends up controlling the people that are part of it.
Right.
And they'll know, and then they got all this information on you. And I'm sure, I don't know of the experiences and stories, but I'm sure they get abused by that information. If you try to get out, they got everything about your life. I mean, the whole point of Dynamics is to get to where they can trace every engram, every major emotional part of your life, back down to the very core first one. And if you can get to that and get them all out, then you're clear, right? So they have everything on you at that point.
Cool. Let's pause here, because I am dying to know what you thought about Tom Cruise jumping on the couches, and I think everyone else is too.
This does tie into it. So going back to that information, the engram stores this poor information. When you get that released through Dianetics, it also releases, with that engram is stored what's emotion. Hubbard says emotion is just a word we use to define life that's an energy, or that urge, life urge. It's stored inside those engrams with that information. So when you release that engram and you erase it, that energy gets released into your body, causing this charisma to come about. So as you're going through Dianetics and you get relieving yourself of these engrams, you're not only getting rid of your past, you're suppressing your past, or they wouldn't say suppressing, but they would just say placing that information into your analytical mind so it doesn't sneak up on you, and then you're also releasing this energy. So if someone who is getting close to clear or clear, a pre-clear, nearing clear, I don't know what language they pick out, an intermediate term there, but that person should be showing signs of a lot of energy, a lot of charisma, a lot of just, I guess that's the best way to put it. Here's just a little thing I have here. So emotion is the life force contained in an engram. When an engram is erased or moved into the analytical mind as a stored experience, it also releases energy that was once trapped in the engram. When all the recorded painful information has been transferred through Dianetic therapy, the person is not only free in terms of thinking clearly, but perfectly according to the analytical mind, or is not just thinking clearly according to the analytical mind, but the person is also operating on a full vigor of life. And this is what he says: how high this life force can go on the survival scale is unknown. A clear goes up into a level of persistence, vigor, tenacity, relationality, and happiness. Perhaps someday a clear will attain the nebulosity the author used to hear about in India, which marked the man who was all soul. Again, ultimately, it's not even so. When you see someone in Scientology jumping on couches and just screaming and just they're in their right mind, right? And then this is the next step is you're on your way to just realizing yourself in your awareness. Like he says here, the ultimate goal is just that he realized he was just a soul, right? That's their salvation. It's just to, again, get so absorbed in yourself. And this ties back to, I'll stop and give a break and I want to hear your thoughts on this, but I feel like Scientology, whether they realize it or not, has really, aside from the demonic origins of it, which we didn't get into, maybe that's something we could talk about. I really think the teachings here are just the same lies of the serpent from Eden, that we'll be like God, and so on and so forth. But that the... when I do bunny trails like that, I always lose my thought, especially. What was I saying? I lost my thought.
Well, you were mentioning the demonic origins of Scientology. So maybe let's kind of start to close our discussion.
Thank you. That was perfect to re-stimulate my mind, get the reactive mind out of there.
There you go.
Is that we are, again, embodied, we are God, divine. We all have divinity in us, and we're embodied. We are embodied thetans, and that we bring about our own salvation. And this is really what you see with the cross, is that instead of it's God coming down to us, the Word incarnate, come to dwell among us, tabernacle among us, and to reveal God to us and reconcile us to himself, it is us in the place of the Christ. That we're the divine, just stuck in flesh, and ultimately we will save ourselves by becoming absorbed into ourselves. So rather than the glory of God being put on display as we love one another and love him, is the glory of man being put on display, getting so wrapped up into himself and his own end goal of pleasure, which doesn't sound very pleasing to me, to be so wrapped up in yourself that you're into a state of that doesn't even it is so unbound from reality that you're in a state of awareness of your own self. That's it. There's no information there. There's no reason. There's no thinking involved. And yet this system claims it's all about free thinking. It's free thinking from thinking. Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah,
what's your thoughts there? So I think it's like, as I see it, it's like a model of the gospel flipped upside down, where men are the hero, mankind.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to say it. It's like a backwards mirror.
Yeah.
I mean, as far as final thoughts go in all of Scientology, I mean, I guess I had no idea what I was getting into when we decided to start looking at it and see what they were all about and get to know L. Ron Hubbard. Yeah. He's a very interesting guy, and he himself was quite charismatic.
Was he?
Yeah,
I didn't watch a video of him, so
he didn't have the kind of charisma that was like
Tom Cruise level.
But he had kind of this. I think people might interpret it as like a sagely wisdom that he sounds like he carries about him, like very just kind of lighthearted, whimsical. Thinks really deeply about things. He just sounds funny. I don't know. He's interesting to listen to.
Yeah, I mean, the guy had a breadth of knowledge that is incredible. I mean, it really is. It's not. He's not deep into different fields of study, but he has a knowledge in various fields of study. I mean, the guy can clearly he could absorb information and it's output it. Mm-hmm. So that's something to be said about the way that God created him. Mm-hmm. It's just it was misappropriated.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, there's definitely so many things that are redeemable in this conversation, and as that they recognize there's a problem. They recognize that we're created to be fulfilled with meaning and with pleasure, but what is that pleasure?
Right.
What is that ultimate pleasure? And I think, man, it's sad when we miss out on enjoying the fellowship of God, who is triune, who
with that gospel call into repentance. And so we do call, of course, all of our listeners into a knowledge and repentance of Christ. But it's been very interesting getting to know this system of thought, and maybe even the creativity of Hubbard.
Yeah, I mean, creative. And I'm not. Maybe that's what frustrated me as I read a lot of him. Is I'm not a creative thinker. I can't. My older brother, is a great artist, and he plays guitar like he doesn't have to try. And other people I know, just great creative minds, but I'm not quite there. So just trying to keep up with his creativity was so hard for me.
And he says that as a songwriter, so
yeah,
bear that in mind.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Yeah. I guess that's a different type of art. I don't know. Maybe.
It is interesting. So anyway, again, thank you guys for joining us. We're going to be picking a new topic. Any ideas on what that might be, Heath?
You know, I've always wanted to talk about you know, at this point, my mind is just so tired. We could talk about the changing of fall into winter.
Yeah, there you go. From fall into
Why
winter.
does it do that?
Why? We'll be picking a new...
We're leaning towards universalism, I think.
Yeah. So we're, in case we didn't make this clear enough, we're picking different worldviews to go through and analyze and learn about. So, of course, if you have any requests, definitely leave those in the comments, and we'd be interested to know what you guys think and go from there.
Yeah.
Cool.
Sounds good.
Well, again, thank you guys for joining us in this episode of ExGarage, and we will go from there. Cool. I'll talk to you guys later.
All right.
Peace.